All right, this video is going to go along with task sheet 428. This is on exhaust systems. There's really not a whole lot we're going to be able to do with this one. I'm going to give you guys just a little tour of the system on my truck and just kind of talk about a few different things, some places that you need to pay attention to, some places where we may find some common problems. So we'll get over to the truck here in just a second and take a look and see what we got going on. All right, we're gonna start off. First, I want to talk to you about a tool that we can use for some exhaust leaks, which is a common problem with exhaust systems. You guys have may have seen these stethoscopes before. They got these metal probes on the end. You touch this off to something down here. You can hear a bearing, all that kind of stuff. These things are really cheap, maybe 15 bucks. You can pick them up at O'Reilly's and all that kind of stuff. But what you do is you pop this part off. And then you're left with just the hose, and the earpiece. Using this tool this way with just this hose actually works really well for finding noises like exhaust leaks, things like that. If you have air kind of blowing into the end of this hose right here, you can really pick it up. So it can be helpful tracking down, kind of small noises. So if you have one of these, pop the end off of it and just use the hose. And what you do around, whatever your component is, you're just kind of moving it around and trying to pinpoint exactly where you may have that noise coming from. So it can be helpful in trying to find leaks. Another thing that we'll see as we get under the truck is you're going to be looking for signs of discoloration. And you may find that around like a crack in a manifold. We got our manifolds over here, or around leaking gaskets or what have you. So here's our exhaust manifolds. Well, one of them anyways. We got a matching one on the other side. So these trucks, and this is something to watch out for on a lot of different things, but on these trucks, these were bad about the bolts, especially on the ends, either end of the manifold. Those bolts will break off. So you got to think about how often, over the life of a vehicle, how many times you start this thing up, shut it down, how many times these manifolds are thermal cycling. So they're constantly, when they get hot, they expand a little bit. When they get cold, they shrink back down a little bit. So eventually that will just break the heads of these bolts off. What I had to put cylinder heads on this truck for some internal cracks, and when I replaced the heads, I had about 4 or 5 of these bolts broken off in the heads. So it's pretty common. I used to actually look for them on vehicles and trying to upsell them as a repair. You have to pull the heads off and put them on a bench and drill out those bolts and extract them with an easy out. I got pretty good at doing those over time, but they are kind of tricky. It's easy to break an easy out, so that's definitely not something everybody would necessarily try and upsell. But look for those bolts. A lot of times you can kind of tell when they're starting to break. I don't have any on this one, but you may see some discoloration around the ends of the bolts, right where the head touches the manifold, because you'll have a little movement there. So a lot of times what happens is those bolts will be broken about halfway, and as soon as you put a wrench on them, they'll break the other half of the way. They'll just fall right off. So anytime you're pulling manifolds off, be careful. If it's an older truck or older vehicle, maybe it looks a little rusty, maybe that's something you need to prep your advisor or your customer on, that you may be looking at bigger repairs if you have bolt breaks. Another thing to look at is heat shields. A lot of times around these little mounting bolts, those will just rust out, and then you'll get some slack in the heat shield, and they will rattle real bad. So that's another pretty common thing. A lot of times when guys have to take these heat shields off and they find something like that, maybe they'll go to the bolt bin and just get a big washer that's big enough to kind of bridge the gap over that hole. So that's another thing you can do, but not terribly uncommon. You can't really see it here with the shield on, but another good area for problems is in between the runners, like kind of in this like web area down here. That's another good area for cracks. So especially just depending on how the manifold is designed. But I see quite a bit of that over the years also, these manifolds just getting cracks in there, in between the webbing. We see them on Trailblazers and Terrains and all kinds of little SUVs and stuff, so pretty common actually. But we'll move to the underside of the truck and see what else we can see. So we're underneath the truck now. This is the flange at the bottom of the manifold. This truck is equipped with what's called, we call a Y-pipe. We'll follow this a little bit. Sorry, I don't have a lift, so I'm just kind of laying under here. We got to get a little close to these pipes, but it's what we're looking at. This converter assembly, it's one big Y. It's got both converters in one piece. So if you have one converter out, you got to replace the whole thing. But here again, we'll start up here at the flange. It's a good source for leaks. When you do engine work, that's a common thing on these, to have to take these loose. So a lot of people are in and out of these things. But check around the sides of those flanges for any like black soot or anything, and you can use your stethoscope to try and pinpoint any leaks out of there. So you can see we've got our oxygen sensor, our pre-catalyst or sensor 1 oxygen sensor. There's another one just like it on the other side in front of the catalytic converter. So we need to make sure we don't have any leaks from the manifold down to these oxygen sensors. There's another one right here. This is our post converter. So this one monitors our catalyst efficiency, while this one up here is for our air fuel correction. So we don't want any leaks anywhere for any air to come in, because that can affect either our air fuel ratio. If we have too much oxygen coming in, it can pick that up and give us an air fuel ratio that we don't really want. And if it's leaking towards the back, we could get false reports of maybe catalyst inefficiency or something like that. So we need to make sure that we're not drawing any air into this system. Again, here's sorry about that. We got our converters right here. These get real hot, so be careful. Now I said these pipes are kind of expensive, being the entire assembly. They go for about $1,200 on these trucks. So a lot of people want to go aftermarket. They'll go to a muffler shop and they'll have these converters cut out and have some aftermarket ones welded in, and you'll save a lot of money doing that, but you're probably gonna have to do that every year, maybe every other year or something like that. They just don't last very long. So either get reputable aftermarket stuff or factory replacement parts. It's gonna last a lot longer than the aftermarket stuff. So again, guys, I apologize for being real up close to this stuff. I sure wish I had a lift at my house, but we're just kind of crawling around on the ground at the moment. So we'll move back a little further on the truck and see what else there is to see. So here we are at the back of the Y pipe. So we moved a little further back in the truck. There you can see another catalyst monitoring sensor on our passenger side. We've got a bit of a collector here where two of our pipes come together, and then we have another flange. So this one isn't real bad, but you can kind of see a little bit of this soot buildup right here. We had a little bit of water coming out of here probably at some point. Probably not enough really to do anything about, but this is another common spot for leaks, especially because on this particular truck and these trucks going forward, there's no gasket in here. You just kind of bolt that together. I think the back side of the pipe has kind of like a bump out, while it's like more of a socket on the front side. So they kind of it's like a ball and socket kind of thing. When you tighten them down, they will seal up, but you know, if you get them kind of crooked in there a little bit, you may get a leak out of there. So I don't have a flex pipe on this truck. Normally it would be, you know, right past this flange, but this one does not have one. We just have rubber mounts. If we look back here a little further, this truck actually has a Flowmaster on it. Originally it was put on by the previous owners. I talked earlier about a problem that I had with this Flowmaster. I believe it was in a conference for those that weren't at the conference, I had one of my baffles rust out in my old Flowmaster. Drive down the highway and that baffle would flip up and block the outlet on the muffler, and it was killing all kinds of power to my truck on the highway. And that took a while to track down, but I got just another exactly the same kind of Flowmaster and welded it in there. So excuse my poor welding, we're not going to look at that. Exhaust hangers, this is pretty common. We got rubber hangers. Now this is aftermarket for the muffler, but it's pretty common to have these big rubber hangers, and they'll have a big bump at the end, so it's kind of hard to so these don't like fall off. And they can be hard to get off of there, so anytime you're dealing with one of these where you have to get over this little bump right here, get some WD-40 or something like that, some kind of spray lubricant, and spray all over this and up inside of there if you can, and then get a big pry bar and give that thing a push, and it'll pop right off of there. So it'll make that a whole lot easier, because it can be a struggle sometimes. But this rubber will break sometimes, or you may break off hangers or whatever, you hit something on the road. So take a look at all those hangers. If those are broke, we can get vibrations, things like that, ground outs. You know, if we have well, I guess on any vehicle really towards the back, you have to go over your rear suspension, and if you break an exhaust hanger, this exhaust could lay down on one of those components and you'll get a whole lot of noise. So these are pretty important. I'm not really going to go any further. I was pretty lazy when I put this Flowmaster in and didn't bother putting a tailpipe on. So there's nothing past this Flowmaster. It's actually sitting out in my storage building out behind my house right now. So one of these days I'll weld that thing back on. But really past the muffler on this truck, all there is a tailpipe that goes over the axle and a couple more hangers. So that's really all I have to show you on this video. You know, everything kind of looks good. I don't really have any problems with this thing. So if you want to take a look at ALLDATA and see if you can look up any information, maybe what kind of stuff you have on your car, you can do that. But this is just kind of a tour showing you guys what my truck is equipped with. So that'll wrap it up for this one, and we will have some more tomorrow.